Good morning, everybody. International. I didn't realize we were actually going live. I'm like, waiting, come on. And apparently we already were. International Order of T. Roosevelt's Executive Director, Luke Hilgemann, is our very special guest today, Thursday, September 5th, 2024. For DrydenWire.com, I'm Ben Dryden, and you're watching DrydenWire Live, presented by Americans for Prosperity Wisconsin. AFP Wisconsin works to reignite the American dream and break down government barriers that hold us back from our full potential. Find an event near you at afpwisconsin.com and join AFP to fight for more freedom for all Wisconsinites. We are streaming today's live show right here on our DrydenWire Facebook page. We'll also have a recording of the full show posted on our website at DrydenWire.com and our YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/DrydenWire, or just search DrydenWire in YouTube. With that, we welcome for the first time, I can't believe it's the first time you've been on. I feel like I know so much about you, but now I'm starting to think I don't know a lot about you just in our first couple minutes before we went live. And I didn't know this about you and this, so I can't wait. International Order of T. Roosevelt's Executive Director, Luke Hilgemann. Luke, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Ben. It's great to be with you, man.
Yeah, I see your name everywhere, and it's always different places, like over the years. I've seen, it was something about the Assembly, and then it was Hunter Nation, and there was something with AFP. Well, actually, that's one of our sponsors. And then it's International Order of T. Roosevelt. I'm like, what is that? So I've seen you all over the place, so I felt like I know you. But again, we had a little chat before we went live and couldn't find out. I know very little about you. So I can't wait to have this discussion. I do have one topic I want to make sure we bring up, so I'm so glad that you're on. It was Senator Rob Staffsholt put something out, a press release last week, and the headline was Staffsholt request for audit of DNR Fish and Wildlife accounts approved. I read it. I don't understand it. And I can't be the only one that doesn't get it. So I know for sure I want to talk about that. But before that, of course, first time on the show, tell us about you. Where were you born and raised?
I'm a Marshfield, Wisconsin boy. So actually born in a small community of Stratford, Wisconsin, which has more cows than people, like a lot of communities in rural Wisconsin.
Yeah, buddy.
It's a great life, man. I've been really blessed to grow up in small rural Wisconsin. Was bit by the political bug early in life. Something that I always found an interest in was government and politics. So that's what I pursued when I got to college. I actually had the opportunity to play for the Wisconsin Badgers for a few years.
What?
Yeah, that was one of the coolest parts of my experiences. Got to live every little kid's dream when I got to run out of Camp Randall and be a Badger for a while. And was there from 98 to 2001.
Hey, hold on a second. Hold on. Did you see that this year is the first year that the Badgers or Camp Randall State is allowing alcohol? What is your thought about that?
I think it's great. The atmosphere, I think, is going to be even more energy and more, probably a little crazier than it usually is. But anything to get the students in the seats earlier, I think, is a good thing for
But let me ask you, though. Come on. When you were there, and I didn't actually know. When I saw that it was the first year they're going to do it, I just kind of assumed that they always had. I didn't realize that it wasn't up till now. But come on. You're really telling me that there wasn't a drop of alcohol in that stadium before this year? Really?
Of course, always was. Always.
Okay.
People were hiding it in little nooks and crannies to get it in there, but
All right.
Now it's out in the open, and they'll make a few more dollars for it, so good for them.
Good for them. All right, so that after college, and by the way, what did you go to college for? Was there something specific that you went for?
No, it was political science and history was my major. Got out of college and was thinking I was going to become an attorney. That was the path I was on. I was going to go to law school. And then had a really interesting conversation with a guy at Best Buy, of all places. I had a college job working at Best Buy selling TVs and radios and other things back in the day. And he was retiring as an attorney, and had a long conversation with him. And he basically said, whatever you do, don't go to law school. It was fascinating. One of those inflection points in life where something happened for a reason. And he basically said, I can't live with myself after some of the things that I was a part of being an attorney. So if you got any other path and you're passionate about something else, go pursue that.
Well, so at that point, that's what you wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And we all kind of get the one person that says, I wouldn't do that. And it's, but you put a lot of stock into that one person's opinion.
Yeah, I did. And again, I'm a faithful guy, so prayed about it a lot.
Amen.
It was kind of one of those things where it's like, do I really want to go to law school? So it's kind of in between anyway.
Okay.
And had an opportunity to go and be an intern in the Wisconsin legislature for a state representative at the time, Scott Souter. who was from my home district here in Marshfield, Stratford area, and went there and did that for about 6 months and got really excited about being a part of the legislative process and the politics in Wisconsin. And he offered me a job as his communications director, speech guy. And
how old were you at this point?
I was 22 years old when I started in the Capitol. So had a full-time job there. And again, sleeping on people's couches, learning the art of politics and running campaigns across northern Wisconsin was all part of the experience that continued to feed my desire to be a change agent, something that I could put my hand on and say that I was a part of something that mattered. And that's where I started.
So how long were you working for Souter?
Yeah, I actually worked for Scott for about 8 years, and then I jumped around. I worked for State Senator Frank Lassay for a while, and then I actually went back and worked for Scott again when he was the majority leader in the State House, State Assembly, when Scott Walker was elected governor. So
what was your job the second time around? Was it the same?
Chief of staff. Yeah, I was his chief of staff the second time, and was able to be a part of the Act 10 story and getting those historic reforms passed in Wisconsin, and seeing our capital getting taken over, to death threats on me and my family and all of the fun stuff that came as a result of that. But it, again, was just an incredible time to be involved in policy and politics in Wisconsin. I think our state is obviously a lot better off as a result of that chapter than when I had started.
The communications, was it communications director? Was that the title first time?
Yeah, it was legislative aid, I think, is the official
okay,
one.
that, and then going to chief of staff. Which did you prefer? I'm sure they both have their goods and their bads, but which would you have preferred?
Chief of staff.
Because?
Just to be able to help make big decisions with the legislature in its entirety, but also with the member themselves. And I like building teams. It's part of who I am. I'm a team guy. And it gave me the opportunity as chief of staff to build a really high functioning team of guys and gals who bought into the vision for what we were trying to accomplish, and we're working together every day to see it through.
So was that the end of politics for you?
No, I then went and started. I was the first state director of Americans for Prosperity after the recall attempts on Scott Walker and the Republicans in the legislature. And so started a program there called It's Working Wisconsin, which was basically a multi-million-dollar effort connecting citizens, voters, taxpayers with the impacts that those reforms had on Wisconsin. And it was my first exposure then, when I took the job with Americans for Prosperity, to grassroots. I'd seen multiple, citizen movements at the Capitol and different, events and things at the Capitol, but didn't really understand what grassroots was until I got to Americans for Prosperity. And then had that light bulb moment where we were sitting at the Waukesha County Expo Center. This was right during the heat of the recall, and everything was kind of blowing up around the Capitol. And we were just playing an educational video that talked about the savings for taxpayers and what those reforms really meant. And in that expo center, we had over 1,000 people that came out for that first event. And we had teachers, we had police officers, we had other public employees who were stepping up and saying, like, look, if you don't do these things, my job is gone.
Yeah.
We understand that, and we want to fight to protect these reforms to protect our jobs. And it was there that I realized that we needed to tell that story statewide. And so that's where the It's Working concept came from. Americans for Prosperity partnered with the MacGyver Institute at the time, which now fast forward to where I am. I actually am a board member on the MacGyver Institute because I believe so thoroughly in what they helped accomplish here in Wisconsin.
And isn't is it Annette?
Annette Olson.
Annette. Yeah. And Annette Olson. I saw her at, I think it was the 7th Congressional, I don't know, there was something event up here recently, and I saw her in person. I talked to her before at MacGyver because she had mentioned, because I used to speak with her before when she was with AFP, and then she let me know that she was now with MacGyver Institute, and then I actually had a chance to meet her a few months ago. So that's just so weird, right? Small world, how everyone kind of knows each other. Hold on. So were you working for AFP at that time in 2012? Were you working for them or partnering with them?
working for them. I was
And
the
what was your
state
title?
state director.
State
in
director.
Wisconsin.
Okay. And
Yep.
Megan Novak's state director right now.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And it was Eric
Bott before that.
Bott.
David
That's right.
Bott before that. Yep.
Yeah.
And then me.
Got it. Okay.
Yep.
So that campaign, was it successful? I mean, how do you measure if it's successful or not? Just by people turning out when you go across the state?
Yeah, no, it was really really interesting what we learned throughout that campaign. When we started it, support for Act 10 was at 36%. And we knew that we needed to increase support for the policies that were passed. When we ended the It's Working Wisconsin campaign, support for those policies was over 58%. So we had seen a significant increase in public support behind the reforms that were passed.
Sure.
And as a result of that, good policy equals good politics. I think it's part of Scott Walker's story. It's part of the legislature story that they went out and sold this vision for what these reforms were doing. Ended up with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in savings for taxpayers, saved public employee jobs. And the reforms are still in the books as a result of it.
And weren't we in a deficit at that point as well? And that kind of got us a surplus. Now, maybe I'm oversimplifying that. I don't remember. I didn't start DrydenWire until 2015, so this was before that. This is just from my own knowledge, just things I'd read. But weren't we in a deficit before Act 10?
Yep, hundreds of millions of dollars in deficit, and that's where Walker proposed the reforms because he knew it was either laying off public employees or figuring out a different way forward. And
so is that? I'm sure you're not. I don't know. Most people I know, when you're from Wisconsin, and hubris isn't usually something associated with rural northwestern or northern Wisconsin folk, or arrogance or anything. So maybe you don't want to actually admit this, but I'm kind of thinking there's a connection here. That recall, and then of course he won that next election, and you're saying went from 36% to 58% just on that topic alone. That had to have played a role. Maybe even I'd say significant role, but certainly a role in his getting reelected. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think he would too. And, I think at the end of the day, you're graded on your policies as a politician, right? And I think Scott Walker had some brilliant ideas that helped us avoid laying off public employees and doing a bunch of things that would have created a lot of harm and hurt in the state. And I think he just needed to tell the story more effectively. And I think that's what the It's Working campaign really showed us is when we got out and we shared the facts, took away the political side of it, Republican, Democrat, union, non-union, and just talked about what these reforms were doing for Wisconsin. I think it kind of changed the course.
Sure.
And if you talk to Scott Walker about that, who's still a close friend, that he would say that was a pretty significant part of his success here in Wisconsin.
So how long were you then at AFP?
I was at AFP. I started there in 2011. And then after the recall elections, I moved from state director out to the national headquarters and became the chief operating officer. And was the CEO. I got promoted to CEO after the 2014 cycle. And again, it was just using what I had learned in Wisconsin, building out effective state chapters. We were in 16 states, I think, when I started as COO, and then we built out into 32 different states, and building that same kind of infrastructure. Real solid professionals on the ground, connecting with the grassroots, talking about the importance of these policies and why the economic freedom, free market approach was the best one, and then making sure that we held politicians accountable to those policies to get things done. And that's what we did. We built that out across the entire country, 36 states, and we moved our budget up. We were $100 million a year nonprofit when I left Americans for Prosperity.
What was it when you got there? Do you remember?
I think it was probably 35, 40 million, something like that.
And that was just in 3 years?
Yeah. Yep. It was a pretty significant increase in funding, and I think enthusiasm from a donor class as well as the grassroots about what we were doing in Americans for Prosperity, and then having real tangible impact that we could share with people about, look, your voice matters. And I think that's the couple of really key lessons that I learned at Americans for Prosperity was one citizen can make a difference still in this republic. And I think that's something that I carry forward in all of the work that I do still today.
So you decided what? I want a new challenge. I've done as much as I possibly could do. I've accomplished a lot. What's next?
Yeah, so well, and Wisconsin was calling, right? So when I convinced my wife, who was my high school sweetheart,
Aw.
we were going to drop everything in Wisconsin. Neither one of us had lived outside of the state before, and move our family, which was very young. We have 3 kids. We moved our young family out to Virginia, and she told me she would give me 2 years to try and rebuild AFP. And every day after 2 years, she reminded me of that promise.
Atta girl.
Wasn't daily, but it was
Yeah.
weekly, monthly. Like, hey, when are we going to get home? And so Wisconsin was calling, and we knew that Virginia was a great state to be in for a while, but it wasn't where we wanted to raise our family. And so moved our family back here. Americans for Prosperity allowed me to go back and forth. But again, with a young family, time commitments, not seeing my kids from basically Monday through Friday, just wasn't something that was sustainable for me long term.
Right.
So I made the tough decision to walk away from Americans for Prosperity, but left it in really good hands with people like Eric Bott, Megan, Annette, and others who continued on with what we had built there. And I think in still seeing those light bulbs of freedom and the opportunities to make a difference for people was really important.
When
So I
you
came back.
made the decision to come back to Wisconsin,
Yeah,
or I should say, when your wife made the decision to come back to Wisconsin, that's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Was it, that's it, we're moving to Wisconsin and I'll figure it out? Or, honey, before we move back, I got to figure out what we're doing when we get to Wisconsin? Which one came first?
It was the former because
Oh,
AFP actually let me continue. Like I said, I stayed on the job there for about 18 months, traveling back
okay.
and forth Wisconsin to Virginia and DC, which was pretty grueling.
I
And so then after that, it was that time where I actually decided that I was going to come back and start a business here in Wisconsin. So I actually bought out part of organization basically that was doing political consulting and different work here in Wisconsin. So I ran that business for about 18 months. But again, it was working with politicians and candidates who could just basically, take my advice or not. And, doing well, making good living. But at
Is
the
that
same,
what would be referred to as lobbying? Or was
yeah,
that like a
yeah,
kind of a
it was
lobbyist thing?
part political consulting. It was called the Champion Group.
Sure.
We did consulting on races in 16 different states and basically helping candidates for public office at all different
I
levels
see. Okay.
build their campaign plan, figure out their messaging, figure out their policy stances, and then trying to help them win. And we had success at it, but at the same time, I'm a grassroots guy. After the experiences at Americans for Prosperity, the grassroots is what I love to do, partnering with good people to try and make a difference on things that are tangible and real. And you can see the impact of your actions. Unlike just getting somebody elected for office, if you're working towards a cause, it's something that I've found a lot more value in than just trying to get candidates elected for office.
So you realized that after 18 months and then decided to do what?
I went to Hunter Nation. So I was actually sitting, working out in my basement here in Marshfield and saw an ad on the Outdoor channel for Hunter Nation. And it was God, family, country, and protecting our traditional values. If you believe in these things, join us at Hunter Nation. And it was Don Jr., it was Ted Nugent, it was a number of other prominent folks who are not only prominent in the hunting world, but also prominent in conservative circles. And so jumped on their website, tried to figure out what they were doing, called the then CEO at the time, a guy out of Utah, and talked to him about what are you guys actually trying to do? And he told me point blank, like the biggest thing we are trying to do is to get hunters to vote. And I said, well, what do you mean hunters to vote?
I heard that's a low percentage.
Yeah, it's a significantly low percentage, and disturbingly so. But I didn't find that out until I got home and did the research myself, because again, because of my background at AFP and political campaigns and other things, I had access to data, and I360 is the best database out there for political data. So after I had that conversation with them, I flew out to Utah, met with Keith Mark, who's the founder and still the CEO basically of the organization, and talked to them about what they were trying to do. Got excited about it, came back home, and then pulled the data to figure out what are they talking about? Is this real? And what I found was truly disturbing.
Which
Pulled
was
the number of hunters in Wisconsin. Basically, we have a population somewhere between 600 to 700,000 hunters, depending on the year. And out of that 600,000 at the time, 340,000 of them had not voted in the last 2 election cycles in Wisconsin.
that's like half.
It's half. Yeah, less than half. So less than half of the hunters in Wisconsin, where elections are decided, and I think we'll see it again this fall, where it's going to be decided by 20,000 votes or less, are sitting out elections.
Well, actually,
And
hold on. That actually surprises me a little bit. I thought it was going to be a lower number because 50% of a group that votes, that's pretty high. I mean, what is our actual voter turnout just in general? Isn't it usually like in the 30% range, 35, 37, depending on primaries are different, but
you're 60-70% here in Wisconsin, so it's pretty high.
okay.
And again, like what I saw there is going back to my previous work in political campaigns across Wisconsin. The hook and bullet voters were always a reliable voting bloc. They were 70%. They would participate 70% of the time. And a lot of the times those people swayed conservative more than they were liberal. And so to see those numbers was like, what's happening here? And it was just an instant call to action for me to figure out what we can do to try and get these guys and gals off their butts and out to the polls to start voting their values. And again, for me, I love to hunt and fish. It's what I've done since I was a little kid here in Wisconsin. And so it's just a natural pairing between my love and my passion with what I know how to do, which is, build effective organizations that create action and impact on things that matter.
So when you, after having this conversation with Hunter Nation, you ended up going on board. What was your title when you went when you went to Hunter Nation?
I was the CEO of Hunter Nation.
They hired you as CEO. What, did they not have one, or was it like, oh, we like this guy better than this other guy, this other clown? Let's get him out of here.
The guy in Utah who was running it was actually a really successful CEO of one of the outdoor companies called Vista Outdoors, which owned Federal Premium Ammunition, a bunch of really successful outdoor companies. And he was just doing this in retirement as a favor because he too was passionate about what they were doing. When I came on board, he made it very clear, like, this is the guy that, has the knowledge and the skills that can help us build out what we need to get hunters to vote and start impacting policy in a positive way. And so he actually moved on and handed over the reins to me, and the board, put me in as CEO, and that's where it started.
And if I recall, so you had mentioned Ted Nugent. We actually had him on for a show. This was a few years ago, and he was the spokesperson for Hunter Nation, was he not? I'm sorry. Is he always? When I said you're the spokesperson, when he came on, he says, "No, I'm a spokesman." I'm like, well, I think we're supposed to say spokesperson. What I liked about Ted was, boy, I mean, what you see is what you get, and I like strong opinions. I don't care if I agree with him or disagree with him, but that was a trip. That show was just nuts. That guy was a lot of fun. So you were there as a CEO when he was it whose idea was it to have Ted Nugent as the spokesperson? Was that before you?
Yeah, no, that was Keith Mark. He was the founder and the guy that came up with the idea. But it was him and Ted and Don Jr., I think, that were kind of the brain trust behind getting Hunter Nation off the ground. And so Ted was always part of the spokesperson. And I think what really made Hunter Nation really effective, and still to this day, is they have a bevy of influencers in the hunting space, like Ted, like Don Jr., Mark Geist, and others who have stepped up and said they'll use their platforms to help push the messaging that Hunter Nation was pursuing. So I think that's where it came from.
So if one of your main objectives was to try to get hunters to vote, were you successful in doing that?
We were. We created a program called Hunt the Vote, which was modeled directly after the left's Rock the Vote.
Rock the Vote. Yeah.
And again, it was just tapping into something that had already been established through Keith and Ted and their work. I mean, they had some of the top hunting celebrities in the country reaching millions of people in this demographic with daily content. And so we created Hunt the Vote, which was basically a program to do voter engagement and activation around, basically shaming hunters for sitting out these elections when they can be such a big difference maker just about in every priority state in the country. It wasn't just Wisconsin, too. I think the important thing is we pulled the data on all 50 states, and what we found was a historic trend that showed less than half of hunters across the nation are actually voting on a regular basis. And so we went in and we started an activation through Hunt the Vote, basically connecting them with the importance of why their vote matters, why our sport was suffering as a result of them sitting out elections, because I think that's the other important piece that we learned is if hunters sit it out, politicians can just ignore them. right? They don't have to take our issues seriously. They don't have to work on policies that impact the future of hunting, and the whole sport suffers as a result. So we did that activation in the 2020 cycle was the first time we did Hunt the Vote, and we saw some pretty significant results across 8 priority states that we were working in. We engaged millions of hunters with our messaging through our influencer network, and turned out 460,000 new voters across the board. And so we were on to something, and we doubled down on that strategy heading into 2022 and saw similar results where it was nearly 500,000 voters that were new voters coming to the polls as a result of our activations. And so that's the program that we built at Hunter Nation and Hunter Nation Foundation that continues to this day. And Keith and Ted and the team are doing a great job talking about the importance of getting hunters to continue this trend of being active and engaged in politics to go out and make a difference on candidates that will then protect and preserve hunting.
So that was up, you said, to 2022. Well, you're not with Hunter Nation anymore. So why leave Hunter Nation? Sounds like what you're trying to accomplish, you're accomplishing, things are going well, and you said to yourself, what? And what's next?
So I got a call from a gentleman who was one of our top people at Hunter Nation, top donor who believed in what we were doing. And he was running an organization that was focused on conservation and trying to affect policy across the board in the country to protect and preserve hunting. And one of the things that I had learned while I was at Hunter Nation, because again, we didn't just do the voter activation, we were engaged in policy as well. And we were the ones that sued the state of Wisconsin to allow the wolf hunt to move forward at Hunter Nation. And when I sued, I learned real quickly that not only did we have a statutorily required wolf hunt that required the governor, when the wolf was off the endangered species list, to basically say the DNR was going to hold a wolf hunt every year. Evers decided at the time that he wasn't going to allow the wolf hunt to move forward because he knew that there was a federal lawsuit coming forward that was challenging putting wolves back on the endangered species list, which would have ended the hunt. And so he delayed, and we actually sued him not only on statutory grounds but on constitutional grounds, because Wisconsin had a long held and then passed in 2003 a constitutional right to hunt and fish. And we sued on statutory and constitutional grounds. And as a result of that lawsuit, not only did the DNR, we won on both accords, both statutorily required. The judge said it was statutorily required, needed to move forward. But because it had the constitutional backing, I, as an individual citizen in Wisconsin, sued the state that my constitutional right was being infringed. The judge ordered the Department of Natural Resources to open the wolf hunt in 72 hours. And it was that, again, another one of those light bulb moments for me where I saw the true power of what an individual citizen can do if they have these tools, right? The tool at that time for me was the constitutional right to hunt and fish. And so that was like another light bulb moment for me. And I'll get around to why this matters for I.O.T.R. Because there's only 24 states that currently have a constitutional right to hunt and fish. And the organized effort against hunting and fishing in the country is a $500 million a year organized, determined, and very well-funded organization.
Can I interrupt you real quick? Because I don't understand. Yeah. You're saying that there's active movements. Again, I'm not a hunter or fisher, which is weird. I live in northern Wisconsin, and I don't. It's not because I'm against it at all. I didn't grow up in a family that did, and that's how most of us are. We do how we were raised, and we just never did. Why? It's going to sound like a loaded or I genuinely don't understand. What is the reason for saying this is bad? There has to be like a legit, okay, if you're just saying like $500 million or all this to, why is it bad?
Well, I think they play on people's emotions, right? These people are animal rights. Well, they're supposed to be in this to protect animals, right?
Okay.
And so they put up these touchy-feely ads showing, pets in cages that are mistreated. And, when they talk about hunting, the first thing they show is baby bear cubs and other things that we don't hunt and aren't legal for us to take, right? And most hunters, again, the vast majority of hunters are ethical people who are following the law, following the rules. There are some bad actors that give us a bad name, but at the end of the day, that's not what we're out there to do. We're not out there to, kill these little fuzzy creatures. We're out there because we're harvesting wild game, because it's part of our family, it's part of our culture, it's part of us bringing meat back to our families. For me, as a Wisconsin kid, venison was a staple of ours growing up, and it still is to this day. It's about 90% of the meat that my family and I still eat is wild game that we've harvested. And I think that's the disconnect that we see right now. So yes, there is this effort out there, and they play on people's emotions, but they're under these touchy-feely names. Like, the biggest group out there is the Humane Society of the United States. Their top stated goal is to eliminate hunting in North America. That organization, Ben, is a $200 million a year nonprofit. So we're just talking about Americans for Prosperity, but this one entity, Humane Society of the United States, is a $200 million anti-hunting group that is out there every day trying to erode our rights and take away these traditions. And so if you look across the board at all of those different groups, the Animal Defense Fund, Humane Society of the United States, Wildlife for All, they all have these touchy-feely names, but at the end of the day, their top stated goal is to end hunting. And there are a lot of well-intended NGOs out there, right? The Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, Safari Club International, the National Rifle Association, through some of their work and their hunters areas, are good groups, but at the end of the day, we're underfunded, we're outgunned, and quite frankly, I think we're out-strategized on some of the efforts that we saw. And so this is getting all the way around to why I went to I.O.T.R. I knew Hunter Nation was in a good spot. Keith and Ted and the team are doing great things every day to go out there and spread their message and keep hunters engaged and activate them to vote. But there was a bigger calling for me. And so I.O.T.R. came and asked if I would be the executive director of their organization, and they were open to the idea of pursuing a constitutional right to hunt and fish in all 50 states as our top legislative goal, which again goes back to what I learned from here in Wisconsin. If you have that, it makes it easier for individual citizens to push back against the efforts that we see like that in Colorado, where they're trying to literally by ballot ban predator hunting of mountain lions, lynx, and bobcat. If you ban mountain lion hunting in Colorado, the detriment that that's going to have on mule deer populations, elk populations, and hunting in general is going to be devastating. But then there's another effort that's going on that many people don't know about. But this group, Wildlife for All, has an effort on the ballot in Oregon that will literally make it a crime to catch a fish, harvest wild game, and even make it a crime to do most forms of farming. Any type of animal husbandry would become a crime.
Wait a minute,
and
fish?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to. Would you be able to catch a fish, or you could catch it, but you can't keep it?
No, you couldn't even catch it. You couldn't catch it. The act of catching a fish, by the language under this ballot initiative in Oregon, would make it a crime.
Okay, that can't be animal rights. I mean, I've never heard anybody talk about animal rights, and they bring up fish. Like, that's not usually what it's like. Well, those fish. Now, come on.
Yeah.
Is that really what that is? Or come on, it has to be something else. It can't be animal rights when we're talking about fish.
It's as crazy as it is. It's infuriating as it is crazy. But that's what the policy would do. It'd make it a Class A misdemeanor, which is a crime, to catch a fish, harvest wild game, or participate in most forms of farming.
Well,
and they're doing this all under the auspice of animal rights, right? Again, protect the fuzzy, furry critters by making it a crime to catch a fish. Like, that's an American tradition. Think about it. Like, every one of us at some point, most of us in Wisconsin anyway, short of yourself.
I did fish a couple times when I was a kid. I think I caught like a sunfish or something once, and I don't know.
Under this, if that happens in Oregon, it would literally become a crime. And that is what, for me, was just when I started reading more and researching more about the efforts that are underway. I'm going to do everything I can to stop that from ever taking hold in America.
Well, Oregon, first of all, it's Oregon. I mean, Didn't they just decriminalize cocaine? Like, literally decriminalize? What are we doing here, folks? Oregon, what a bizarre state. It really is.
But what we've learned, though, is when those bad ideas start on the left coast, they move their way quickly across the country.
Yeah.
And so...
yeah, it sets a precedent. Exactly. 100% right.
Yep. And so that's why I'm at I.O.T.R. Again,
And
our
isn't there
top
just also like a significant financial and economic aspect to hunting? That's what I've always assumed, because again, not a hunter, but here in north of Wisconsin, man, that's huge. Like last year, our hunting stuff was down. Like I think a deer population down. It wasn't as much. Local businesses, they feel the effect of that stuff.
no doubt. Wisconsin hunting in Wisconsin is a $2.5 billion economic driver.
And again,
Two and a half.
I don't know. That one's weird. I don't understand why we get rid of that. Like the wolves, I don't understand either.
Yeah.
I mean, you hit to a certain point. I think Wisconsin, last I saw somewhere, and I'm sure this isn't accurate, like we're over 1,000. Like we want to maintain a certain number, right? I understand that. But apparently they also do a whole bunch of bad things like kill deer, which hurts the hunting, which hurts our economy, which they kill calves and whatever else that they do. So it just kind of seems like a no-brainer. Like, well, okay, we have enough. It's not going to go down. Let's have a wolf hunt. But I remember running the stories from Tom Tiffany, I think even some from Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty, which now I think about it, you were probably one of the persons that was represented. You probably went through them, because I remember doing a story about somebody was suing them. That was, now I think about it, that was you. But then it was like, okay, the hunt's on. Then nope, the hunt's off. Nope, now the hunt's on. Nope, now it is. Like, I don't even know where we are right now in Wisconsin. Are we hunting wolves right now or not?
No.
Because it's on the endangered species list.
They put them back on the endangered species list. This radical judge in California, again, totally disconnected from the reality here in Wisconsin and other states that have wolves. They've met every benchmark of population recovery. The wolf is a conservation success story. Again, hunters using our dollars to bring back those species because, again, we want them on the landscape. We're not an organization, and I never was a part of one that said we need to kill all the wolves. At the end of the day, they're an important part of the ecosystem. But like all wild creatures, they need to be managed. And unfortunately, we have a wolf population in Wisconsin now that's booming. They have no natural predators other than humans, and they are growing exponentially. The amount of interactions between wolves and dogs and wolves and livestock is at an all-time high in Wisconsin now. And again, this is all because we had a radical judge who decided, nope, we're not going to allow any type of management of wolves.
Let me ask something. Deer. So when people find out that I don't hunt, usually that's the first thing. Oh, like you're not like animal rights. No, that's fine. I'm not part of PETA or anything. Go ahead and shoot them and kill them. I just don't like the field dressing. Literally, like, that's the main reason I cannot go out and hunt. Same reason with fishing. I don't mind catching the fish, but I don't want to get it off the hook. It's just gross. I don't like doing that. I mean, I know that they don't have feelings, but I do, and I feel badly that I'm ripping this thing out of their mouth. But when it comes like deer, it's please go and hunt deer, because if you don't kill them, then my wife is going to when it jumps out in front of her car with my kids in it, and that's bad. So what would happen, do you think, if there was in Wisconsin, hypothetical, no deer anymore, no hunting for just deer specifically? What would the outcome of that be in 3 years?
In 3 years, I think we would see, like you said, astronomical car collisions between deer and humans. But the other part, which is the part that I don't understand about these animal rights groups, is it would lead to disease, overpopulation. All right. If you're not managing the species and taking the extra that comes every year, because wild animals breed, right? They're going to continue to proliferate. If you don't take the extra, Mother Nature steps in and takes care of it. And that ends in disease. It ends in starvation. It ends in terrible outcomes for these animals. And so again, as hunters, we know that. And we balance that population by taking the excess every year. Animal rights activists, if they really cared about the existence and well-being of animals, would understand that too. But unfortunately, I think their judgment is clouded. And a lot of times what I've seen from these animal rights groups is they're in it for the money, man. Right? I mean, you take a group like HSUS, they got a $200 million budget. Their top executives making $2 million a year running that organization. This is a big money deal for these groups. And so I think for us, we have the truth on our side. We have the science on our side. But at the same time, we do a really poor job of telling the story about hunting being a true part of conservation in not only in America, but across the globe.
Messaging always seems to be the key.
Yes.
Right? Because you see headlines, and you see someone talking about, but it's, but just take everything else out of it. Let's look at this factually, logically, rationally, reasonably, and let's project what outcomes would happen in the event that one happens or the other happens. It's just matter of factly. Take the emotion out of it and the politics out of it. So your number one priority at I.O.T.R. to get
Yep.
these on. I think you said 24 states have a. How did you word that? It's in the Constitution. It's your constitutional right to be able to hunt and fish.
Yep. Yep.
Have you had any success so far? I know it's only 2024. You've only had like one election cycle probably since then, or maybe this is your first one. Have you had any success yet? Is it going the way you want it to go?
Yes, we have. So we actually worked with our partners in Florida to pass an amendment through the legislative process there, 154-1. So Democrats and Republicans joining together. We only had one Democrat that voted against it through the legislature. Yeah.
Now talking about setting a precedent.
Yeah.
Right now you can take that right and go to all the other states and say, look what Florida just did. I mean,
amen. And that's, so it's on the ballot in Florida. And again, Florida, the fishing capital of the world, we chose it for a purpose, right? So we have a constitutional right to hunt and fish, and we changed the order of it because fishing is preeminent in Florida. So it's the right to fish and hunt when we talk about it in Florida. That is on the ballot there this November, and we need to get 60%. So Florida has a higher threshold to amend their constitution than most states do.
Oh.
So we need to get 60% of
Actually,
the
that's
vote.
not a bad idea.
No, it's not. I think it's actually a really good idea.
You're right. Yeah.
Because it prevents bad ideas.
Exactly right. 100% right. Yeah.
Taking hold.
Yeah.
So we got to get to 60%. So we are out there through I.O.T.R, both our foundation, and then we created an action arm, our advocacy arm, T. Roosevelt Action. We're out there. We've reached over 4.5 million Florida hunters and anglers with our content. We have 150,000 people who've signed their pledge that they're basically said, yes, we are going to vote to forever protect fishing and hunting in Florida. And we are making a strong push to get that 60% threshold, which I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to do if we continue on this path and we continue to tell the truth and show the impact of what fishing and hunting means in a state like Florida. And then when it passes there, we have states like Ohio, South Dakota, West Virginia, Missouri, Arizona, Nevada. There's a number of states that we've already worked with to start talking about the importance of introducing this legislation and allowing it to move forward.
Speaking of legislation and politics, I brought this up at the very beginning of the show. Senator Rob Staffsholt sent us a press release that we published last week, and the headline was Staffsholt request for audit of DNR fish and wildlife accounts approved. I read it. I don't really understand it. Plus, it's, from a politician. No, I like Rob. Seriously, that is a good human being. I really enjoy Rob. I would even consider him a friend. But, it's still a politician. And what's that?
Yeah. Most of the time.
Most of the time. Yeah, not all the time. But, it's still from a politician. And my understanding, outside looking in and not being, I'm not that familiar with it, but I feel like there's a Republican versus DNR thing in Wisconsin right now. I don't know how accurate that is or what that's even all about. But, you take it with a grain of salt when it's a press release from a politician. You just do.
Yep.
So what is this about? Because I can't be the only one going, so why are we auditing the DNR? Is it just because those Republicans hate the DNR right now? I mean, I don't think they hate the DNR, but what is this about?
It's about tracking the dollars, and it's about bringing accountability to those dollars for hunters and anglers in Wisconsin, as well as trappers and other gun owners. Okay, so just let me walk you through kind of the basics of this. So in Wisconsin, it's pretty well accepted that hunters and anglers and trappers pay a license fee for hunting, fishing, getting a trapper's license, having a boat, those types of things go into a fish and wildlife account. Okay. That's big money that we collect every year for that. It's about $60 million for those fees every year in Wisconsin. Okay. Then you add in, there's programs that, and again, hunters and anglers, we do a poor job of telling this story. Pittman-Robertson was a program that was created back in the early 1920s to basically assign an excise tax to every bullet, every gun, everything used in the sport of hunting.
What's a what tax?
An excise tax. So it's basically taxed at the manufacturer's level. People don't even know that this tax exists most of the time.
Got it.
Right? But it exists, and it over $1 billion has been raised as a result of this tax on products that are used in hunting and fishing. And there's another program called Dingell-Johnson, okay, that is basically the fishing side. So if you buy a fishing rod or fishing hooks or tackle or bait, there's a tax that's put on that the federal government collects. And then those dollars are taken and put back into the states every year. So in Wisconsin, that's big money too. So just this last year for Pittman-Robertson, the federal government sent Wisconsin back $33 million in federal excise taxes that are paid by people who participate in these sports. Dingle Johnson was another $13 million. So you're looking at a total of almost, well, over $100 million.
Yeah, 60 million of the others, and then 33. That's 46. So yeah, 106 million total.
Yeah, right. And so that's a lot of money that's being put into this fish and wildlife account and other accounts through, because Pittman-Robertson and Johnson Dingle don't all come back into that same wildlife account, but there are strings attached that says these dollars must be spent on conservation related programs. So, your boat ramps, your shooting ranges, your wildlife trails. These are all things that are funded through these taxes.
Makes sense. If that's what you're taxing on for what it be people that are using the stuff for, then you take that money and put it back into whatever. Yeah, totally makes sense. Yep.
So there's over $100 million in this account annually. Uh-huh. The DNR, unfortunately, has now come out and has said that there's going to be a deficit in the fish and wildlife account because, again, we've seen this decrease in the number of hunters, right? 20% less in license sales here over the last couple of years for white-tailed deer, which is the largest hunting species in the world. And again, it accounts for 80% of the hunting in America is done on the white-tailed deer population, okay? So as numbers drop, the DNR is saying that they're going to have a deficit. What the legislature has said is, where are you spending all of this $100 million before you come back to people and ask for more money? Which again, hunters and anglers and trappers across the board have always stepped up to fill the gap when needed. Because again, we pay for about 75% of conservation in the country is funded through either the excise taxes, as we just talked about, or through license fees and other things that are put on hunting and fishing, okay? So the legislature said before the DNR should come and ask for a license fee increase, let's make sure that the dollars that they're already receiving are being spent on what they're intended to do.
All right, can I stop you real quick?
Yep.
One, how much is a license fee right now?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're hunting, but
let's say the white-tail, you said that's the biggest one.
I think it's $24.
All right, 24.
Yeah, I think it's 24 or 36. Don't quote me on it, Ben. I can't remember.
Okay, that's fine. And then you're saying so the 106 million or the over 100 million, but I thought so this audit is trying to figure out where is that money going, but I thought you were saying that this has to go back into, right. So of course, like where else would it go?
Yeah, exactly. And again, the DNR, unfortunately, this is not the first time that an audit has been done of this account. It happened, the last time it happened was in 2006. What the legislative auditors found at that time was that, and I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was like 15 or 16% of the dollars were being used on administrative costs. And the legislature said at that time, after seeing that, it was too high. So non-related things, right? So they were using it to fund researchers in the Air and Water Division, which again has some corollary with hunting and fishing, but at the same time, it's a stretch, right? Yeah. And so that's what the legislature is doing here, is basically saying before we go back to the hunters and anglers and the folks that that fund these things and ask for more money, we need to know where this money is being spent. Because I think that, and again, we've all heard these stories. Anybody who works in the hunting and fishing space has heard stories from people who are saying, the DNR is misspending our money. Well, what this audit does is gives us some assurance. And I think it's not political, right? Is the money being spent for its intended purpose? And if not, stop doing that and use that money to fund the programs that you're telling us you need more money for.
Instead of raising the cost of licenses and fees and exactly Bingo. Trying to get more. Yep. Honestly, I just kind of assumed, and you would probably know this because you were in a part of legislature for years. Isn't the DNR, don't they just have to do, I don't know, every year, here's our numbers? Like, maybe they don't have to give a presentation to the legislature, but at least make that available for everyone, saying, okay, here's our expenses, this is what we spent everything on, line items, like 190 pages long thing. But they're supposed to do that. It's like, don't we already have these answers?
Kind of. So the DNR is very creative, just like most legislative or most government entities and organizations. the ability to go through and see different codes, because every one of these things, and I had the opportunity to be a staffer on the Legislative Finance Committee when Scott was on the committee, Scott Suter, my former boss. And basically every one of these things, yes, they give you an accounting for most of the money, but it's got these like 17-digit numbers that you have to then go back and track it back to this and that and figure out where the money's
And who's
spent.
going to do that?
In it, right?
Right.
And so I think this is just a tool for the legislature to say, okay, here's the areas where you're misspending money. Stop doing that and spend it on the things that are more forward facing that you're asking for more money for.
I think that's I would have no problem with that. Are you aware of? There always has to be if one person or group or organization or maybe even political party says we think we should do this. There's always going to be the opposite side of that. Have you heard a lot of pushback for this, either from DNR or from whatever organizations or a party or anything? Have you heard any pushback yet?
Yeah, there were some Democrats when they had the meeting last week that said this is pointless. We don't need to do this. We just need to trust the DNR, that kind of stuff. So that rhetoric's out there, but at the end of the day,
that's weird.
Again, this is dollars and cents. It's math. It's show us where the money is, and it brings a level of accountability. Because at the end of the day, like I said, hunters for the most part and anglers are happy to step up and continue to fund these projects if it means more money, if they truly need it. But it's also a little facetious to say we've got $100 million and we can't fund fishing, hunting, and trapping and the other conservation-related programs with those dollars. Something doesn't mix, right? So I think this is a really logical step, and I'm glad Rob is leading that charge.
Attaboy, Rob. Okay, we like him on this one. We'll give him that one.
Yep. Yes.
All right, we're almost up against our time. What else do you want to make sure that we talk about that we haven't had a chance to talk about yet?
I think just in general, the overall messaging that hunting is conservation, right? That we are the largest user-paid group in the country when it comes to conservation, right? We do a terrible job, and I think this is one of the exciting projects that we have working right now at I.O.T.R. is we've partnered with the Cabela's Family Foundation. The same people that used to own Dick and Mary Cabela own the Cabela's stores. They're world-renowned, the best hunting and fishing stores in the world, right? So we partnered with them with one of their sons, Dan. Dan Cabela runs a program called The Hard Truths of Conservation. And this is a program that's on the History Channel. It's a hunting show, but it's on the History Channel. And so it's reaching 15 million people who may or may not hunt and telling them the truth about what we do as hunters. We fund a large percentage of, the forestation that happens, the wildlife development, the habitat, the growing of the flocks and herds of these animals. And he tells it in a really eloquent way that really gets to the fact of if you try and ban or criminalize hunting, someone else is going to have to step in to fund these things. And I think that's one of the biggest things that we have to constantly consider, especially as we see inflation taking a larger percentage of our family budgets, is who's going to fund this? If you ban hunting or you criminalize hunting and fishing, who's going to step in to fund it? And the answer is not good. It's going to have to be tax dollars that are already committed to public education, to Medicaid, Medicare, other programs that take a large bite out of this. If we don't have a user pays model, somebody else is going to have to fund it if we want to continue to have incredible wild lands, wild parks. And that, I think, is something that doesn't get enough conversation in the country. So I'll just.
When is that on? You said History Channel, The Hard Truths. When is that on?
So it's actually on Saturday. They have an outdoor block. And again, your listeners can find this on our website as well. Go to IOTR.org. We have a page that basically talks about this partnership.
Awesome.
It's on Saturdays. And again, we had the opportunity, just got back from Alaska here a couple of weeks ago. We went up there and did a bison relocation project, which was incredible. They took bison from Yellowstone and took them up to this remote island off the coast of Kodiak, Alaska, and released bison there to help the native population have a constant source of protein. So during COVID, this native community was basically shut off from the world. They weren't flying planes in, and they weren't bringing boats across, and so they were protein deficient. And so this group of Native Americans got together and created this project where they are now releasing bison on this remote island. And these bison they're incredible. They have over 70 bison on this island now, and it's true conservation, hands-on conservation, bringing back this wild species to an area that it used to be. And it's, again, private philanthropy and hunter dollars that are making these projects possible.
Do you think it'll ever get to the point where it's criminalized to hunt?
God, I hope not. But, I think if you'd have talked to a hunter in Oregon
True.
5 years ago and asked them, do you ever think that there would be an effort here in Oregon to make elk hunting or deer hunting a crime, or even catching a fish when a grandfather takes their grandson or granddaughter out with their Barbie pole? Do you think it would be okay for that would ever become a crime?
They would have laughed at that 5 years ago, said that will never even be a topic. That will never even come up, much less get passed.
And now it's, again, this organization is out collecting 10,000 signatures a month trying to get this on the ballot
That's
in Oregon.
stupid. That's absolutely dumb.
Yeah, it's dumb, but it's a real threat. It's a real threat.
Luke, we need to have you back on the show.
I'd love it. Anytime, buddy.
This was great. All right. Thank you so much. Any parting words?
No, again, I just thank you for what you're doing. I think bringing information to your listeners up in northwestern Wisconsin is a critical part of just supplying this kind of conversation for people to hear. So thanks for what you do, Ben.
Well, I learned a lot. So that's why I want you back on the show, really, is because I'm learning so much about a topic that I know very little about. And I'm a little surprised by a few of the things that you said, including potentially decriminalized and how much money is going pushed into. Like, there's literally organizations that are hundreds of $millions funded that are trying to just stop hunting. I didn't know that existed. I guess I'm living in a bubble. I didn't know that. Like, why would you do that? Like, we're not like hunting cubs, right?
No, we're not. That's illegal. We're ethical. We are the managers of the wildlife.
So bizarre. Special thank you to our guest today, International Order of T. Roosevelt's Executive Director, Luke Hilgemann, for taking the time to come on for a chat. I'm sorry, I just now realized that my screen was off. We had some comments. I apologize I didn't get to any of those. I'll see everyone right back here on Tuesday when Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald and I will be back for our weekly episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. So until then, thank you for watching, and as always, have a blessed day.